The recording will be shared on our YouTube channel so that people who can't join us this evening for the live event still get to listen to our wonderful speakers and hear what they have to say on this subject, which I'm sure is very close to people's heart and very interesting for a lot of our audience. We've actually had, this is the most popular subject of the year so far, so congratulations to our farming policy people. We've had over 80 people sign up tonight and expect quite a few to join, and also lots to watch after the fact. So please feel free to share the link with any friends who didn't manage to come tonight. It will be available as soon as possible. So tonight is a little bit different to normal. We have got Stroud Young Greens supporting us in the session, and they will be doing a takeover and doing some of the introductions for our speakers, and hopefully, yeah, shaping a little bit what the session looks like. So thank you to our Stroud Young Greens. I'll just do a little introduction to the subject matter and then I will hand over. So today we're talking about farming policy and whether we think it's fit for purpose. The government claims its new post-Brexit system for farming is rooted in sustainability and the environment. The environmental land management schemes will pay farmers to provide environmental goods and services alongside food production. What we're talking about tonight is whether we think it will work, whether it will encourage young people to engage in farming and to draw in a more diverse community into farming, especially in rural areas, which is obviously something that is close to the Stroud heart. So I will pass over to Anna, who is our Stroud Young Greens representative, and welcome, Anna. I'm sure you are happy to be here and we're all very happy to have you. If everyone would like to turn off their cameras other than our speakers, that would be fantastic, just so that we can have a focused evening. And feel free to pop any questions in the chat as we run through all the presentations, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. Okay, thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Jenny. That was great. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for having us. And would like to thank everyone for coming as well. So I just wanted to start off by saying a quick introduction about the Stroud Young Greens. I hope everyone can hear me okay. But we are a small but growing group of young people who are interested in green politics. For example, issues such as the climate crisis, which does affect everybody on and off the earth. We support the Green Party, and because we align with their beliefs. So that is why we are the Stroud Young Greens. And we believe that the world would be a much better place if the Greens are in power, of course. So the Stroud Young Greens was set up to basically cultivate a safe space for young people within the Stroud district to discuss and act on issues that are important to them. And like I say, we're currently quite small, but we are growing all the time. And so a little shameless plug, if you know anyone under 30 that might be interested, send them our way. But yeah, so thank you to the Stroud Greens and Cloud Cafe for allowing us to introduce the speakers tonight. And we do have 4 great speakers tonight who will share their views on the subject, as Jenny mentioned. And I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who's Katie Jarvis. Katie Jarvis is from the National Farmers Union and will be speaking on farming in Gloucestershire, especially the Stroud district, and the role of the NFU. So I'll pass it on to Katie to begin, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Anna. I'll just really quickly share my screen and hope that it all works properly, because this is usually where we all fall down and it all goes horribly wrong before we've even started. If I click from the beginning, right, can you see that?
Yeah, perfect.
Super, thanks. Right, yeah, so hi everyone, lovely to see so many people appearing on the screen and wanting to listen to people talk about this topic. Obviously, it's what some of us as speakers is particularly close to our heart, and we're very passionate about it. So I am the county advisor for Gloucestershire for the National Farmers Union. So that basically makes me a jack of all trades, master of none. I look after everything involving farming and our members in Gloucestershire. So we have about 1,100 members in the county, across the whole county. And I'll just talk a few minutes. We don't have terribly long, but I'll just touch on farming and kind of what it looks like in the county, and particularly with Stroud. And then just go through a few little bits and pieces and touch on ELMS. And I was asked as well if I could give a brief explanation of what ELMS looks like, so I'm going to be the one doing that. Hopefully that's what the plan was. So we'll kick off then. So in Gloucestershire there's over 3,000 farm holdings, and this is all based on DEFRA data, by the way. Farm holdings is always really difficult to work out what's going on, actually, because we don't have a really good census of farming, but we think there's about over 3,000 holdings, commercial holdings in the county, and that's over 220,000 hectares of farmed land. So Gloucestershire is known as a rural county, and we have obviously several rural districts, of which Stroud is one of them. So there's over 6,000 people directly employed as farmers and farm workers, so again a good chunk of population. And then in terms of the actual agri supply chain, there's over 50,000 workers. So as the NFU, we always say that food, the agriculture, it may only be, it's something like 1 point something percent of the national GDP. It may have shifted slightly over the last few years, but it underpins the food and drink sector in this country, which is huge and worth billions to the UK economy. And that's no different in Gloucestershire. So, and I'm going to have to look to the side, I'm checking some of my figures so that I don't get them wrong. So as I said, it's about 50,000 people employed across the county, which is 15% of the workforce then in the county. So a significant percentage of people employed in agri, food and farming. So this generates about £1.4 billion for the economy in the county per year. That's again about 9% of the economy. No one checked my maths too thoroughly. I'm rounding things very so slightly up by 0.1% just to make it a little bit tidier. And so those figures are sort of a higher share of the economy in Gloucestershire than they are of the economy nationally, if that makes sense. So we have more people in agriculture, we have more of the economy based in agriculture and farming in this county than we do nationwide. And then you can see there from my last little point is that Gloucestershire farming generates £333 million per year, is a nice number to look at, while of course delivering for the environment. And I know we'll touch on the environment a lot more as we go along, and hopefully in lots of your questions. So then looking at some of the detail, now Stroud is quite representative of the county as a whole. Gloucestershire generally is quite, it kind of has a bit of everything. Most of the county has a bit of everything, apart from perhaps the forest, which doesn't tend to have the arable that we have elsewhere. But the main crops in the county are wheat, barley, oilseed rape, and quite a bit of fruit as well, soft fruit and tree fruit. There's a lot of livestock, so mainly beef, poultry, meat and dairy. I've got lots of figures which I won't go into, but just as a figure, kind of almost a kind of a reference point. So in terms of livestock, we have over 115,000 head of cattle in the county, and that sounds like a lot, but in the southwest, so from sort of Gloucestershire, Wiltshire, all the way to the bottom of, well, the Isles of Scilly down in beyond Cornwall, there's over 1.7 million. So actually 115,000 out of 1.7 million isn't such a huge number after all. So in Stroud then generally, or more specifically, sorry, we have got more dairy. I would say there's more dairy based around Stroud. Not so much poultry visibly, and arable, but all sorts of other things. And then farmers around Stroud, of course, which I'm sure many of you have noticed living in the district, the farmers are also quite well diverse. There's quite a few lovely farm shops, there's different camping sites and other holiday diversifications. Obviously the town's lovely, and then the area is beautiful to walk as well, and very well known among walkers. So there's all sorts there, and lots of diversification among the farming population. So I'll just touch really briefly on the NFU for those who aren't super familiar with who I even am representing. So the NFU is the UK's biggest, well, Britain's biggest body representing farmers. We effectively, our number one job is to represent the views of our farmers all the way up the chain to make the policy environment the the best that it can be so that farmers can run productive, resilient businesses and produce food and deliver for the environment and that sort of thing. This is just an array of the few different things that we do, of many different things. We are an apolitical organisation, so we deal with all parties across the spectrum, and that's obviously really always important, especially in the run-up to potential elections and that sort of thing. So we like to make sure that everybody who's coming in, whether it's as a local councillor or whether it's someone who's in the running for Prime Minister, is well briefed on what's going on in food and farming and understands what's happening among our members. So then just going on to the ELMS bit, and I do apologise if all of you are actually experts and you've all been brushing up on what environmental land management plans mean, and some shakes of the head, so that's good, that's what I'm hoping for. So ELMS is, I forgive, this is a slightly older slide. Things are changing almost literally week to week, and we've all got headaches trying to keep up with it and trying to keep up with what the government is doing, but I will give you a brief summary. So ELMS is split into three. There's three different tiers of ELMS. The Sustainable Farming Incentive is the one that we focus on perhaps the most as the NFU. This is the scheme that is available for all farmers of any size, whatever kind of farming you're doing, you can engage with this scheme. So this is very much, but I will talk about it a little bit more in the next slide. Actually, I won't go into too much detail right this second, but this is the one that we focus on. And this is very much in development at the moment. There's farmers involved in it, and so we're following it closely and working on it to make sure it keeps developing in the right direction. The next level has changed around a bit, but it's actually going to be countryside stewardship, which some of you may have heard of already. This is a scheme which already exists. It's a fairly successful scheme. Lots of farmers are involved in it. You can have different levels within that scheme. Countryside stewardship will keep developing, but it is quite a positive one, and it delivers a lot of capital grants and things like this, which help farmers in the environmental, kind of do different environmental tasks and a few other bits and pieces that they can engage with for different payment rates depending on what they're doing. The final one then is landscape recovery. This isn't one that we're doing a huge amount with as the NFU because it's really for very large scale. It's for 500 to 5,000 hectare projects. So really what this needs and what we're seeing is that it needs it's taking a bit of facilitation to round up farmers in an area and say, look, are you interested in a project on X, whatever the project is, and then those projects apply for the funding. So it works ever so slightly differently to the other two, which are based on individual farm businesses applying. So I won't go into much detail on landscape recovery. Again, it's still very much in rollout and sort of early applications are going through, and this project's kind of being set up for it now. So hearing a lot about that, but I won't go into detail. So the Sustainable Farming Incentive then. So I'm sure that many of you know from the news over the years that when we were in the European Union, we used to get direct payments from them, subsidies, agricultural subsidies, farming subsidies, all kinds of different phrases. And that was effectively money based on how big an area you were farming. You didn't have to do a terrible amount to get it. To be honest, it was effectively free money, and it was a very reliable and appreciated part of farm incomes. That's now being phased out. I don't have it on here, but over this timeline here, the BPS is actually being phased out. So each year we are now getting a smaller amount, and the final payments will be in 2027. Meanwhile, this is coming in. So the SFI then is any kind of farmer, as I've said. It's super flexible, much more so than any other environmental payment we've ever had. And it is very much focused on the environment. Farmers can go for, as you can see, there's introductory, intermediate, advanced. You can go as easy or as complicated as you like. There's lots of things that many farmers will already be doing and perhaps will want to apply for, say, intermediate or introductory level and say, look, we're already doing this. We'll apply and we'll get some money for this. Or they may want to take some bigger changes to their farming practices and then go more into the advanced, or indeed work their way through. They can build it up over time. They can add more. They can make it move into the more advanced payments, and you can stack different standards. So when I say standards, I very unhelpfully don't have a list of them here, but it's things like improved grassland soils, improved arable soils. There's going to be a new one about integrated pest management. We're expecting new ones around flood management and holding flood water. There'll be ones around hedges. There's all kinds of different things, more and more coming every year we're expecting. So we're just working with DEFRA to make sure the detail of those makes sense and will actually work in a farming environment and, you know, make those payment rates attractive for farmers to want to get into it, so that everybody wins, basically. So the farmers are getting the money for the activities they're undertaking, and of course the environmental gains that we'll get from that as well. So this really is the core scheme that farmers will be interested in, and this is the one that we're sort of doing the most amount of work on. I think other speakers perhaps will touch on how some of this might affect. Paul in particular might touch on how what he thinks of this as an actual farmer. But that, I think, is, I'll stop there. I may not have even filled my 10 minutes, but I didn't want to go into too much detail at this point, but obviously very looking forward to the questions at the end of this. So I'll just stop sharing.
Wow, brilliant. Thank you very much, Katie. I actually didn't realize how many millions were generated, and also it was great to hear about the activities of the NFU, because I didn't realize quite the broad scope of it. And I did also appreciate your explanation of the ELMS, I think you call it. Yeah, I was calling it ELMS. So thank you very much for that. And next we have our second speaker, Anya Whiteside, is our next speaker, and is a youth land justice mobiliser in Gloucestershire. She works with the Landworkers Alliance, which is a union representing small farmers, growers, foresters, land-based workers who want to see more sustainable land use and food sovereignty. And she works with community groups and young people and underrepresented groups who want to be involved in farming and land-based work. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Anya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. If you go to the next slide, you've introduced me, I don't need to say anything else. But I was just going to focus on making land more accessible, which is kind of the project that I've been focusing on. So part of my role is to look at what the barriers are to farming and land-based work, particularly for underrepresented groups. And I've had a particular focus on both youth and Black people and people of colour, but all different underrepresented groups. And part of my work is here in Gloucestershire, so working with different community groups and other groups, looking at what the barriers are. And part of it is linking to a more national level kind of campaigning on how to make land and land-based work more accessible to everybody. So this obviously connects into wider questions about land justice and what the future is for food farming and climate, because they're obviously extremely interlinked. One of the other projects that I work on is also working with young people from very different perspectives who are working on food farming and climate. So we're doing a joint project with the Young Farmers Clubs and with Flame, which is the youth branch of LWA, so representing agroecological farmers and young people who want to move into agroecological farming or land-based work, and also the Students for Sustainability, which is the main student union and student-based organisation working on climate issues. So it's really exciting to see youth groups who are all extremely passionate about climate, food and farming coming together and actually having conversations about what they think the future of farming is in this country. So next slide, please. So I guess the first thing I'd say is that I think when we're talking about land-based work and farming, it's really worth being aware just how many barriers there are for people who want to move into land-based work. So I always say, you know, when you are at school, if you don't come from a farming background and you go along to your local careers fair, there might be the kind of like, this is how you become a doctor, this is how you become a plumber, this is how you become a builder, but doesn't tend to be universally across kind of all education a kind of clear way of how you become a farmer if your family aren't already involved in farming and you don't have an agricultural background. So that's the first barrier before we've even got started. But then there are a whole load of other barriers that I think are really important to note. So obviously access to land, which I'll talk about in a minute a little bit more, but is a real barrier for a lot of people. You know, there isn't lots of land that's available. It's quite hard to access land if you don't have family already involved in land. Or, you know, if you're just starting out, so you don't necessarily have the capital to buy land. Accessible training and opportunities, I think, is something that I hear a lot. a lot of the young people I work with who really want to move into land-based work say that the training that's available doesn't necessarily start with the assumption that you've grown up in a city or that you've never been living on a farm already. And that can be a barrier for quite a lot of people. And that there's also some, there's obviously we have very great training facilities in some ways, but that there is a real desire among the groups of young people that I'm working with to kind of look at making some of those opportunities a bit more accessible. The rural-urban divide, or what I touched on before about having not grown up on a farm or not feeling welcome if you don't have an agricultural background, is what people talk to me a lot about. The kind of not knowing how it all works, not feeling like you kind of are embedded in what it means to be a farmer or a land-based worker. And I think racism is obviously a key one for a lot of communities. So I've been working with a network of BPOC growers, so that's Black people and people of colour who are growers, and we've brought people together who had a retreat together to kind of talk about some of those experiences. And it's very clear that for a lot of people, racism in a rural environment is very much still a big problem. Access to finance, and access to finance, but also being able to access finance all the way up the scale. So to start with a small portion of land, to then move into a bigger portion, to be able to expand, because I guess the traditional model of farming tended to be that you would work with a parent or as a kind of informal apprenticeship, and then you would slowly take on different things. Well, if that's not the model that you're starting with, it can be quite hard to start out with that initial, how do you actually get going? And then there are things that make it difficult for everybody. Transport, particularly public transport, if you don't have access to a car. And another big one is housing. So obviously in rural areas, many of the farmer houses have been sold off. And so the availability of affordable accommodation is a real problem for people. And lastly, making a living. I mean, I'm sure the other speakers will agree that there are many farmers who work extremely hard, and it's not always an easy route to take, and it's particularly maybe not easy if you have a lot of barriers to get through before you've even got going. So yes, next slide please. The second point I just wanted to make is that our countryside is not accessible for all, and this is something that we've just got to be aware of. So there are many ways in which our countryside is not accessible. The first one is around land ownership. So it's worth saying that half of England is owned by less than 1% of the population. 30% of this is aristocracy and the gentry, 18% corporations, 17% oligarchs and city bankers, 17% we don't actually know. We don't know who owns those bits, so they're not publicly available. 8% is public sector and 5% is homeowners. So the system of land ownership that we have in our country is is not very equitable at all, but it's also has very much historic links. So those who've owned land through history tend to own large amounts of land at the moment. So I think, I always say land quite often is a thing nobody talks about, but it actually affects everything, whether we talk about, reparations, history of colonialism, whether we talk about access to clean water, food, whether we talk about the air pollution or housing. Everything relies on how our land is actually used, but there's not often the starting point of how should we use our land. That often comes kind of later down the conversation. Next slide, please. And then just to also say that in terms of accessibility, even before you've got to the point of wanting to be a farmer, it's very clear, or wanting to work on the land, it's very clear that those people who actually have access to being in the countryside has a huge amount of inequity to it. And I think the reason that that's important in relation to farming is because generally it's quite hard to do something that you can't see. It's quite hard to be in, you know, start working in a job that you've never seen, or live in a place where you've never like sort of had any access to. So just a few of the figures that's worth being aware of is that those over 65, members of the BAME population and residents from the most deprived areas of England are the least likely to visit the countryside. That was from a government report. 20% fewer visibly minority ethnic children visit green space compared to white middle class children. And it's well documented that Black people and people of colour experience racism and unwelcome visibility in our countryside. Another figure that's kind of worth highlighting is that 1% of visitors to national parks are from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, and that's despite making up about 14% of the general population. And almost half of the country's most socially deprived areas are more than 15 miles by road from national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty. And public transport in our countryside tends to be poor, as I'm sure people are very aware. So the accessibility of the countryside is a real barrier to people being able to actually be in a rural space. Next slide, please. And then just to move on to land-based work, I guess it's worth us being aware that in the UK, the average age of a farmer is 58. There are different figures, and it's always interesting, but that was the one that I think is the most recent. And there are a lot of people working the land who are past retirement age. So it tends to be an older demographic as a job. Agriculture is the least racially diverse sector in the whole country, with 99.8% of agricultural workers being white. And although women make up 55% of the farming workforce in England and Wales, if you include unpaid and family labour, only 16% of those people are officially landowners or managers. So there's an inequity of who has, who's doing the work might be more evenly shared, but who actually has the power and the land ownership is definitely highly inequitable in our country. Next slide, please. So obviously that all sounds very gloomy, but I think the thing that I find incredible is when you start to unpick these barriers, there are really a lot of barriers to farming for anybody. People who are from farming backgrounds will tell you that there are a lot of barriers for them, and other people who have many more barriers. There are just so many to working on the land and being farmers, and yet despite that, every day I'm inundated with people who are really, really passionate about wanting to move into land-based work, wanting to know how to get going, wanting advice on how to access land, on training institutes, and I find that very exciting. Flame, which is LWA's youth branch, is extremely diverse, exciting movement of people who are just really passionate about moving into land-based work. And it's been really exciting working alongside the young farmers clubs and actually bringing together young people from very, very different backgrounds, but who all feel that farming and climate change and food production is key, and they want to think about it more and being involved. So I'd just say the time for change is now. Next slide, please. And then, so that's a kind of like quick whiz on some of the things that I specialise in and have been working on, which is looking at kind of access to land-based work for underrepresented groups. But in terms of ELMS, because I know that's a bit more of the focus of our discussion, LWA and my colleagues are very much involved in working with DEFRA and campaigning for ELMS to be as much as possible a system that supports small and agroecological farming, so sustainable farming. And there are key things that we want from ELMS to be able to help in the work to make sustainable farming viable and positive and something that people are able to do. So I'll just quickly run through some of the things that we've been campaigning on. So one of the key things is that farms that are smaller than 5 hectares should be able to access farming funding. They can't at the moment access all the funding that's available. Payments for public good should include payments for farmers and land managers to host the public. So at the moment, the kind of premise behind ELMS is instead of getting money for owning land, you should get money for doing something good with your land, for using your land in the public good. And what we've been saying is, okay, but let's make sure that that is wide and also includes accessibility. So for example, you know, payments for farmers should include visits, you know, enabling people to access land. So visits, open days, cooking courses with certain groups, helping people to access land. Funding for the landscape renewal and forestry should also be linked to improved accessibility. So at the moment, you can, under the landscape and renewal and forestry, you can get money for certain things, but we want priority to be given for farms that have good links to public transport. So, and we want improved access and more footpaths to be part of the criteria for getting funding. And the priority should be given to funding community land trust projects rather than private landowners, and training in diversity and inclusion, particularly around land access. So it's about saying, let's look at ELMS as public good, and it's very clear that that needs to be around climate change, and some of it doesn't go as far as many of us would like on climate change and biodiversity at the moment, but it also doesn't go far enough or really touch enough, anywhere near enough on accessibility either. And there's the kind of ELMS program, but there's also the wider future farming program, and LWA are really keen to see many things supported within that wider program. So things like land matching, which means linking up people who want to access land with those who have land and want to open it up, of which there are many. There are many landowners who come to us who are actually really keen to enable new entrants, so new people who are coming into farming, but they have no way of, at the moment, connecting those two people. And so that's a big thing. Support for land trusts, working with training institutes, capital startup grants, particularly for small ecological farming and sustainable farming. So there's a whole range of different things that we're calling for, but I've just kind of focused on a couple of the ones to do with accessibility for now. I think that's my last slide, is it, Jenny? Did I have more to say? Oh, I did have more to say, of course, Gloucestershire. So in relation to specifically the things that we've been doing in Gloucestershire, I guess starting to think about how we can make sure that children and young people see land and land work from the start as being a viable option for them is something that's really key. And that's about working with educational institutes, right from primary schools up to, you know, agricultural colleges or universities. There's been some work to kind of look at how we can enable new entrants to connect with landowners who have land that they want to enable new people to farm on. So that we've been doing a bit of work with FarmEd to set up a new entrant for Gloucestershire matching service. So they've been kind of leading on that, but that's been exciting because it's kind of looking at how you could do that on a Gloucestershire scale, and kind of, if we can prove that it works, there might be the ability to do it here even more, but also to do it nationally. And then also supporting the journey, so helping people who are new entrants feel that they belong, that they are part of a community. And then there's a whole load of wider activism on land, food and climate justice. I linked in and see Chloe's here on some of the work around county farms, which are the county council owned farms that are that are used by farmers, and kind of like ways in which they could be made much more accessible for new entrants who are wanting to move into farming. That should be a really exciting way, an opportunity for new people to be able to start on their farming journey, if they could start on starter farms on a kind of small scale on council owned land. At the moment it doesn't always enable that, but that would be something that would be really exciting. And to do that we need to make sure that the county farms aren't sold off, so that's fairly key. And then yeah, wider activism work. I mean, food for LWA, food sovereignty and the right to good food is a key part of the driver. Although we're a union that supports agroecological farmers, it's quite an exciting organization because it brings together members and supporters from both, you know, more traditional farming, but also kind of much smaller city farms or community-based kitchens and things like that in the wider movement. So it's quite an exciting conversation that's being had between those kind of different urban and rural places to say, how can we work together to make the food system work better for all of us, and to make sure that climate and food sovereignty are at the heart of all we do. Thank you. I think that's me done.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Anya. Honestly, that was really interesting to hear about your work with youth groups, especially as we are Stroud Young Greens, and that there is an incredible interest from the young people as well who want to get involved, because it is true that we've also noticed that as well from our side. And also we've had a lot of discussions about the fact that typical education doesn't really cover. There's so many gaps in typical education, and I'm aware from what you were saying as well that, you know, it doesn't have much focus on farming as a career or provide that opportunity to young people, etc. So yeah, there do seem to be a lot of barriers into that line of career. And of course, the statistics that you mentioned on percentages of land owned and those who visit the countryside were quite shocking. So I didn't actually know all of that. But yeah, it was great to hear the positives at the end though. So yeah, thank you very much. And now we have Stroud Young Greens member Hannah, who's going to introduce our third speaker. So take it away, Hannah.
So next we're going to hear from Paul Westaway, who works at Gamage Farm and Dimmock Farming. He'll be telling us about his farm and how it is affected by government policies, and he'll also tell us about what is needed to help Gloucestershire farms move towards regenerative agriculture.
Great stuff. Thank you, Hannah, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm also going to do the brave bit now and try and share my screen and hope it behaves itself. So let's go here and go here, and we'll go here. And can you see my slides okay?
We can't at the minute.
They should be coming up now. Hang on, let's try that. Is that any better?
Not yet, Paul.
No, we did have a cunning plan, so I have sent them in as well. So you may have to upload them and maybe do it that way. Can you pull them up for me? Hang on, I actually know what it is. No, I know what it is. It's Zoom. Hang on.
Oh yeah, great. Just
now we're getting somewhere. See, I'm a bit more of a Teams freak. Apologies. So can everybody see okay now? Yeah.
Perfect.
Hang on, let me pull them up to the full screen. Let me go there, and I need to go. You can now see this side, so I need to go into different presentation mode here, don't I? So I need to go. Somebody young and technical, help me with this, please. Will you?
You can press escape on your keyboard.
Yeah.
And then go right in the corner there. You can see from beginning.
Yeah.
You should be able to click on there, I think.
Yeah. And then can you see this rubbish over here? It says no notes as well. Yeah.
Sorry. If you press escape again.
Yeah.
And then in the bottom right, there's like a zoom in and zoom out, and there's like a little thing that looks like a glass of wine.
Yeah.
Next to it. Click on that.
I've still got this bit here. You still see, you can see what's coming next.
Up at the top of the screen, I think it says switch screens or something like that. Right at the very top.
Our technical support is saying it's the drop down of display settings. You can
Right,
see
so we will,
in the middle. You see there's like end slideshow and then display settings. Yeah, that's it. If you click on there and do a drop down.
well, this one here.
Yeah.
But the other thing is we can see the big picture.
Hang on, it's in here somewhere. My apologies, everybody. You're coming on a farm walk talking to a farmer, so apologies, this doesn't want to behave.
Don't worry at all.
Hang on, what do these do? I don't know why that's set doing that, what it is. Dagan, do you want to share my slides so we don't have this nonsense if I stop sharing, yeah? Yeah, he said, give me 2 minutes. So
No
just
problem.
so
He's been up in the background.
apologies. I'm a Teams freak, not a Zoom freak. I don't know how to do that on Zoom. Yeah.
No, don't worry at all. If you want to just sort of introduce yourself.
Yeah.
And,
so let me flick through this. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to talk. My name is Paul Westaway. We farm a Gloucestershire County Council farm in Dimmock in Gloucestershire. We have around, we came here in 2006, and it was really nice that actually Anya did quite a bit of my presentation for me, which was quite good. So look, there we go, fantastic. So here we go, so we'll get cracking now. Thanks for that, Dagan. So jump onto the next slide, because that's a pretty cow in the sunshine, which we haven't seen today. So what's the objectives of our farm here? I want to build a thriving rural business. We want to be carbon neutral by the end of this year, and actually we are on track to be there, which is quite fun. So we'll chat about that. Number one objective, we have to make up what our customer wants. We want to use as much local business as labor as we can. We've learned the hard way that you either work with nature against it, you fight with nature, you'll come second. So that's not going to work. And obviously, as we're tenants of Gloucestershire County Council Farm, I want to leave the farm in the best place possible for the next tenants to get the chance. However, there is a big however in this, and I can see Chloe smiling because she's heard me say this before, but it is absolutely true. Sustainable regenerative agriculture and food production is not possible unless you make a profit. Okay, and it is that simple. We're planting lots of trees and owl boxes and all sorts of stuff for the environment, but you still have to make a profit to pay for it. So I'll come back to that a little bit. So bit of history, because I know that people are always interested on ears. This farm has been here since Roman times. It was gifted by Richard I to a Norman knight called William de Gamage in 1197, hence it's called Gamage Hall Farm. And this farm was purchased by the council in 1919. And many of you will be aware, after both wars, we had food crisis here in the UK. And the county councils bought up blocks of lands to start to get farmers going again and get food production up. And that system still exists till today. And we came here in 2006. And to Anya's point, she's absolutely right. We came here. My parents are not landowners. We don't come from money. We came here with a wheelbarrow and an overdraft. We still have both, and yet we've made it work. So I am living proof you can do it if you get the opportunities. Just a bit of history. We live in a house that was built in 1672, and I always chuckle that this is the new house because the old one was built in 1432. We came in 2006, it was 103 acres. We really came with nothing, but we did have 8 cows. Today we would farm 180 acres and about 150 cows, and I was lucky enough to win Farmer of the Year in 2013. So if you do things right, you absolutely can do it. Can I have next slide, please, Dagan? So we take our social responsibility really, really seriously. So just a few things that we do here. We interact an awful lot with Hartpury University, which is obviously just over the hill. Those of you know where Dimmock is. I sit on the Digital Innovation Board and the Farm Board there. I sit on a couple of committees for DEFRA, trying to get rid of bovine tuberculosis because it's a big challenge and it's no good for anybody, so we need to work on that. I chair the Farmers Tenants Association body for Gloucestershire, which is all about very much what Anya was chatting about, getting young farmers into agriculture, moving all that thing along. We provide lots of employment, and one of the things that we have done as well, which I'm really pleased that Anya talked about because we're very, very proud of it. I'm going to minimize that so we'll see it better. Is we did some work with a program called Kickstart. So Kickstart was all about young people that really just needed a chance in life to get into farming, and we started off with a young lad who came here one morning a week from the Kickstart program, and he's now a full-time employee. So we're really delighted that that works. So those schemes are really important. So credit to you, Anya, they work really well. And we do endless media here because it, obviously as much as we possibly can, we need to tell our consumers what we're doing on the farm and why. Next slide, please. So we're on track to be carbon neutral by the end of this year, which will be really exciting. So just proving now not every farm can do this. Not every farm is as lucky as we are. Not every farm is set up as we are, but there are things you can do. So most of our questions are very much around basically we're not organic here, but we're quite close to being organic. So things that our inputs that push our carbon footprint up are fuel, diesel, electric. So we're looking this year, working very closely with our landlady, some solar things going on to a new shed, some wind and some water heat exchange to really bring all those costs down. We monitor all the cows, so we're making the cows are efficient. We'll come on to that in a minute. Really using the best grazing practices we can to use the resources we have as best as we can. We get very excited about manure planning, so we don't buy fertilizer anymore. We're getting all the nutrients we need from the manure that we produce on the farm, which is pretty good. We're really into looking after our crops, and we are in high level mid-tier stewardship, and we'll talk about that in trees and hedges. So we'll come on to that as we go on a little bit further. So next slide, please, Dagan. So this is just interesting. So all the females, all the cows on the farm have a Fitbit in their ear. So it's the same technology that you have in your phones or your watches. See if you've done your 10,000 steps per day. This is a graph of a cow called Diva, and you can see the dates on the bottom. And basically, we need to make sure that she's ruminating or chewing the cud somewhere between 400 and 500 minutes a day. And if she is, everything's working properly. So we want these cows to have a great life, to have a happy life, but much more importantly, to be really efficient at the same time. So that's a technology we use for that too. So all our cows have Fitbits in their ears, and we can tell that everything's working very, very well. Next slide, please. We're really into our carbon footprint, and this is an article that I know Chloe and some of the gang on here are aware of. This is a friend of mine called David Andrews that did some work with the University of Bristol and actually doing a very, very, very efficient, very, very efficient system to doing beef from grass, very, very good output. And actually, he's sequestering 6.5 kilos of carbon for every kilo of meat he's producing. We're not quite as good as David yet, but these are the sort of measurements we're into to really not only produce fantastic beef and cattle, but also to make sure that we're doing our bit for the environment. And we're really into this sort of work. Very pleased it was done at Bristol. It's nice this sort of science has been done at a local university. Next slide, please. So with us, soil is everything. It's all about dirt. Manure planning is key. So we soil test each of the fields. We work out what nutrients they need, and then we put the right amount of manure on the right thing. We use as much FYM is the farming term for farmyard manure. We use that to lift our P&K. We're really careful on how we use our yard water, and we grow crops that do two things that are drought resistance, but also are nitrogen fixing. So they take nitrogen and they put it into the soil rather than have to buy it in their bags. So they would things like red clover, white clover, and lucerne. Those legumes are also drought resistant. And any of you remember the summer of last year, you'll be really need to do it. The other thing on this soil type, and we're very lucky, and I'm not in the burn the plough brigade in any shape or form, but on our soil type with the sandy soil we have here in Dimmock, we don't have to plough very much now. We can direct drill and grow these crops without turning the soil over. Every time you plough a field, you do release carbon And we're fortunately we're lucky we don't have to do that here. Next slide, please. This is a really exciting, if you're interested, this is our manure plan. So this is you see this is the farm's got the M50 through the middle of it, and you can see the various bits and where we don't put muck and where the ponds are and all that sort of stuff. So really careful planning into what muck goes where, keeping the muck where it needs to go, keep it out of the rivers, keep it away from the ponds. All this sort of work is done every year. It's not rocket science, but it works really well and actually makes the farm work in a more efficient way. Next slide, please. And this is an example. So this is a lovely old Moores drill. This is a fairly old piece of kit, and that's direct drilling clover into a grass lay. So no plow, they're just drilling that in. That drill cuts a slot. It drops the seed in and rolls it on over the end. And that sort of thing is a really interesting piece of kit that goes in. I'm seeing lots of questions, and I'll answer that one later, Martin, because it's a good one. It's a really nice piece of kit. And so traditionally you would have ploughed this field, you'd have worked it, you release the carbon. With this sort of equipment now, we can actually direct drill the crop straight in, and really better for the environment, and also is actually cheaper to do as well because there's less diesel. Next slide. We're really into our stewardship. So as Katie's chat about earlier, we're in level 2 stewardship, 2/3 of the farmers in that. We've had a really big program of repairing hedges. We're putting new trees in with every 20 meters. It's a close the gap scheme. So we're doing that. So we have 75 trees coming tomorrow, which is really exciting. So we've got another 75 trees going in the next couple of days just to really mend the hedges and close those gaps. We've got winter bird strips here. We've got owl boxes. We've put back a couple of ponds that used to be there, put them back to where we are. We have got some ancient sites here of where British people were here well before the Romans. So we respect those, and we really protect the local flora, and the wildlife is really, really key. However, as I'll say it again, all this stuff, if people demand local food and all this takes is investment, you've got to be profitable. The farming business has to be profitable to be able to do all this stuff. While there are grants for it, the grants are paid after you've done the work, not before. So you need to be profitable before you do it. But all is possible. And I'm very, very proud of the farm and the way it looks, but we've got a long way to go, and we'll still make it even better yet. Next slide, please. So those of you who are interested, that's a winter bird mix. So we put this around some of the edges of some of the farms, and these are various crops in here, kale and white millet and all sorts of things that feeds the birds through the winter time. Ups our biodiversity, makes the whole farm work more efficiently. It works really, really well. So if anybody's interested in winter bird seed mix, happy to chat through that as well as we go along. Next slide, please. This is the piece. This is a selected heritage site. So this is a little old British camp. Some of you have been to the farm and have seen it. This is some old works that is well pre-Roman, where British people lived. It's there. It's marked on the map. So we look after it. We don't plough it. We look after it. We cherish it. It's a bit of history. We should look after things like that. And it has no impact on the farm. And we look after it in a very, very positive way. Next slide. So that's my farm walk in 10 minutes. Seen lots of questions come in. Look forward to some questions later. All I would say is that you can work with nature. The new schemes that are coming are progress. As long as they work with farming, we still have a big population to feed, but lots of things are possible, and happy to take some questions a bit later on. And thank you again, Hannah, for the introduction.
Thank you, Paul. That was really great to hear that you can work with nature. I love that kind of positive note. And thank you for presenting your farm to us. Yeah, I know it's really interesting to hear how you began your farming journey, at least for me, and how successful you are now and how many different things you are doing. And I really don't know how you have the time, honestly, in your day to do everything.
Well, I have a very, very good family, and we have great labour. Which came from the Kickstart scheme, which Anya talked about that a minute ago. I mean, those schemes are the number one issue on many farms is supply of labour, and that came from that scheme. So we're chuffed to bits, and he's here full time now, from this little shy lad that just needed a chance in life, and now he's a full-time employee. So, but we do lots of school visits, lots of other things as well. So it's all about interaction with we're part of the community. We need to work with it. Yeah.
That's honestly so encouraging to hear. I love hearing that. Yeah, so thank you very much. And yeah, so now we're moving on to our final speaker this evening, Chloe Turner, who is our final speaker and who is County Councillor and Chair of the SDC Environment Committee. And Chloe is exploring tonight for us, I think, the role of the county farms, the councils, political parties, and their understanding of how they support sustainable farming and policy. And I won't say any more, actually. So Chloe, thank you very much. I'll let you take over.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to amazing speakers so far. I feel privileged to be amongst them. So I'm just going to try and share my screen.
Yep.
Perfect.
I'm going to concentrate primarily tonight on the county council's rural estate, which has come up a few times now. Anya and Paul both mentioning it, obviously, because Paul has one of the county's farms. So just talk a little bit about what it is, what it looks like, and then the task group that we have underway at the moment at county, focusing on particular aspects of that estate. So I'll look at what sessions we've got planned, what else we're looking at, and then what we can expect in terms of outcomes of that review and how we might support that. So I'm very conscious there are people on this call who know an awful lot more about this than me. So feel free to jump in, particularly the officer who runs this estate, because I've noticed that she's on the call, but I won't name her. But like many of the counties around the country, Gloucestershire County Council started buying up land towards the end of the 19th century, but it really came into play around the time after the wars, when men were coming back from the front, they needed jobs, and there were family members who weren't going to inherit, and it became really quite an important part of the countryside, the county farm. And unfortunately, since then, particularly from the 1970s onwards, a lot of counties have gone on to sell all or a large part of their estate. We're very fortunate in Gloucestershire that we still hold around 2/3 of the original estate, which is about 7,000 acres. And if you're good at maths, if you were listening to Katie's numbers earlier, that's around 1.2, 1.3% of the overall land area of Gloucestershire. So it's really quite a substantial estate. It is fragmented across around 58 farms. Most of them are mixed farms, i.e. Some dairy, some arable, and potentially other things as well. And 19 of those are the original Agricultural Holdings Act tenancies. So those are tenancies where the farmer basically has the farm at least for their working life, but practically speaking for their lifetime. And those tenancies are no longer given out, but there are still 19 of them in existence. So of the rest of the farms, there are 7 dedicated dairy farms, 4 arable, 1 horticultural holding, and 5 parish council allotments. And then the rest of it is 40, about just over 40, what are called bare land holdings. So that's land holdings that don't have buildings on them. And some of those are used for things like telecoms, leases, and various other bits and bobs. There used to be a very substantial department at the county council who managed this huge estate. That is now a single officer who is frankly miraculous in what she manages to do, because as you can imagine, the role encompasses not just being a land agent, but an advisor in an increasingly technical funding sphere, and a social worker, and all sorts of other functions. She does amazing things. The estate is, because as Paul points out, farming is about numbers. It has to be profitable. The estate does generate revenue for the county council. It's not huge numbers. I think it's around gross income of about 800,000. But what it has been used for to date, particularly over the last 20 years or so, is generating capital disposal receipts, and the farms have been reorganized and cut in different ways, and more profitable holdings have been sold off for things like developments of housing or school estates and that sort of thing. So where this task group came from, the current administration's policy is one of what they call progressive rationalisation. So that is the idea that the estate should be reduced down to 5,600 acres between now and 2030. That's clearly not something as a Green Party that we support, and I think there are many other people within the agricultural community who would much prefer to see this public asset held in public hands. So we put forward a motion last year. It was part of a wider climate motion, but this was the sort of core piece that was retained and accepted, and that built on many years of sort of action by various opposition groups at county, trying to prevent this progressive disposal of the county's rural estate. So the task group has been established. We've met for the first time already. We've got another meeting tomorrow, and the purpose of it is to specifically to review the estate's value for climate, for nature, and for society. So within climate, looking at carbon sequestration, renewable energy, that sort of thing, recognising that a lot of the farms within the estate are already on countryside stewardship programmes of one sort or another, and there's a real role for them to be exemplar projects, and to, you know, for that the county to have that role as you know, to act as exemplar for the fantastic things that can be done within farming to support climate action. In terms of nature, Paul talked about how fundamental soil quality is. Water clearly is key as well, both on the farm and what comes off the farm, and the kind of biodiversity that can be built into the farm environment and supported through ELMS and stewardship schemes generally. But also the societal role, and this plays into all of the things that Anya has been saying, you know, that these farms were, one of the primary roles of the county farms was to enable new entrants to come into farming, and now we can see that widening of equality of opportunity that they could represent, the role that they could have in local procurement, particularly local public procurement and food security more widely. There's lots of opportunities for diversification. A lot of the tenant farmers are already doing fantastic things in terms of diversification. But these farms are absolutely fundamental to the local economies that they sit in and the local communities. You know, these are families who their children go to the local schools, their farm businesses support all kinds of things across the community, and we want to, you know, continue that and see more of that. And I think the county council have an absolutely key role to support that continuity into the future. So in terms of what the task group is doing, we have invited lots of key stakeholders to come and present to the task group over the next 6 months. Some of those speakers you've heard from tonight. So the NFU is clearly absolutely key to this, and alongside that, the Tenant Farmers Association, Gloucestershire Tenant Farmers, that Paul heads up. Landworkers Alliance, so Anya's organisation as well. We will have a visit from the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group for Gloucestershire, who provide fantastic support to farmers for accessing all of these many schemes. You know, it's a very complex environment for farmers at the moment who already have a full-time job, and FWAG play a key role in helping farmers to access the funding and the expertise that they need to really get stuck into these stewardship programmes. We've also got representatives coming from the ROC Review, which is a government level review for making the most out of England's land. We're also, and I'm really keen we do that, looking at what other authorities around the country are doing, particularly some of the more pioneering work. So Cornwall, for example, in 2019 did a comprehensive review of its county farm estate, and within that, sustainability, climate, all of the key things that we're looking at were absolutely embedded in that piece of work. So I think we can learn a lot from that. Brighton's City Downland estate it's a slightly different form of estate. It's not as agricultural, but it's still a very significant piece of local authority owned land. And like Cornwall, their estate review, which took place, I think it was last year, or certainly was published last year, really has sustainability as at its heart as well. So we'll be looking to that too. So, as I mentioned, it's a 6-month review process that we're looking at, and what comes out the other end will be a series of recommendations to Cabinet. This built on precedent from previous task groups, and the most recent relevant one that I'll be looking to is Restoring Our Rivers, which took place last year and had a really comprehensive set of recommendations for Cabinet, all of which are accepted. So I'm hopeful that that's where we can get to. Those recommendations will feed into the wider rural estate strategy that the administration are undertaking, which looks at the whole, you know, the profit motive, the capital disposal, receipts potential, and everything else about the rural estate. And what we want to see is, you know, we completely acknowledge that it's a public asset, it has to pay its way, but we want the climate, the nature, and the societal benefits of this fantastic public asset to be properly valued and properly taken into account in that wider strategic review. We'd also like to see an increased profile for the rural estate within the council. You know, it is such a fabulous asset, and it's managed brilliantly, and the tenant farmers are fantastic, and we would like to see more publicity for that and a greater role for that within the council, and that will certainly be an ongoing focus for our Green group at the County Council. And I think that's all I wanted to say tonight, really, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Chloe. That was very interesting to hear and listen to, and again, I learned quite a lot from that one, actually. And it was really heartened to hear that Gloucestershire had kept a large part of their estate. But I didn't like hearing, of course, that the current administration's policy for progressive rationalisation. Yeah, it's just a shame, really, that it's not. I don't know. I feel like we in these modern times we should be kind of better than this, or they should be better than this, or I'm not sure. But no, it was really good to hear about the positive action that has been and that is being taken, and the outcomes of the review did kind of leave me feeling quite hopeful as well. So thank you, Chloe. So just to say thank you to all of the incredible speakers, because really what an interesting evening this has been. And thank you again for allowing Stroud Young Greens to introduce these very impressive speakers. So I'm going to pass the reins back to Jenny. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anna. And just to say how proud Stroud Greens are to have a Young Greens organisation in our area, and how fantastic it is that not only are you there, but that you're taking a huge interest in these different subjects and trying to learn more and engage in these like really important topics that are obviously going to affect your future probably more than all of ours. So like a huge digital round of applause for all of the Stroud Young Greens. And we look forward to having you join us on other cloud cafes in the future. That's it now. I'll be hanging my hat up as the host, and I'll be passing on the reins to the next generation. Okay, so there has been so many questions and so much chat. I've been trying to keep on top of it. I'm sure there are some that are specific to individual speakers, but feel free, any of our speakers, to comment on the questions that we have. So the first question in the chat is from Jackie Dale. I think it's specific to the NFU, but anyone else has a comment, then feel free to come in on it. Jackie, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, then feel free, but if not, I'm happy to ask it for you.
Oh, hi, thank you. I was just wondering, I'm really surprised you asked, but so I was just wondering how the NFU can be apolitical, and that's a really broad question, but I just wonder how you can be. Thanks. Thanks, Jackie.
I'll jump in there if that's all right, Jenny. So I don't know if I fully understand, Jackie, exactly the kind of the direction of your question, but basically we're apolitical because we treat every political party exactly the same. We work equally with every different political party from local level. So my kind of role, a very county based role, all the way up to national, and actually in our Brussels office as well, which I actually used to work in. We worked with our British MEPs all exactly the same. So that's kind of our approach. We do obviously have to work very closely, or that's the wrong word, we do have to work a lot with or towards the government at the time, whichever party that happens to be. But of course we do also want to work with opposition party and other even smaller parties, including the Green Party in government. So we do work with everyone, and hopefully that answers your question, Jackie.
It has, thank you.
Thanks, Jackie, for that question, and thanks, Katie, for answering. If any other speakers want to come in on any of these, just like raise your hand or unmute and start talking, no problem.
Yeah, and just from my point of view, as a very proud NFU member, farming is a long-term business. Politicians come and go, and therefore, and parties come and go. And so, for example, I'm doing an awful lot of work with DEFRA. And one of the things that we're working in, when you chat to the civil servants there, Jackie and Jenny, is yeah, it's a conservative thought process at the moment. I think we may have a change coming at the next general election, so it would be naive for the NFU not to be fully engaged with the environmental part of all the parties, because we don't know what will happen after the next election. So I didn't join the NFU because we lean towards one political party or the other. We need to engage with everybody. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, good to have the association view and the member view, so thank you very much for coming on that. Okay, so next question is from Martin. Martin, if you want to unmute. Okay, I see you there. Perfect.
Hello, and thank you to all the speakers. It was really great having invited you all to hear you speak. It's really, really brilliant. A question, and I think it's been partly answered actually by Iris, one of our participants, around ELMS and the payments also being directed towards public access and farm visits. But it'd be interesting to hear some of the other speakers' views on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll pick that one up. Absolutely, Martin. I mean, it's there's public money for public good for farmers. We understand that it's ingrained in those schemes. And actually, I see it as an enormous opportunity. You know, I mean, the public are our customers, and therefore, anybody that wants to come here is welcome. We have any amount of open days and visit, and absolutely. And we have I think you've been to our place, Martin. I think I've maybe not met. I think I may have met you. We have a wonderful bridleway right through part of the farm that's on the old Roman road. Interestingly, it's the only road around the farm that hasn't got potholes in it. Interestingly, it was built 2,000 years ago, and actually and that we're really proud of, and we've just had the daffodil walks in Dimmock, and we had a hell of a crowd because fortunately the daffodils flowered at the same time as the daffodil walk, which is rare in Dimmock. They're normally early or late. So absolutely, Martin, it's in ELMS. As farmers, we're part of the community. We need to communicate even better than we do now. So absolutely, it's in there. Yeah.
Thanks.
Maybe I just add to that I think certainly the colleagues I'm working, my colleagues who are working directly with DEFRA on this, it's true that there is there is access and kind of farm visits built into some of the schemes, but we'd be very keen to see like some of the reality of what it means to put on events like that, to be remunerated in some way. So there are lots of to actually, as a small farm or a working farm trying to do a lot of these things, actually sometimes you need, it would be great if some of the funding was a bit more flexible or covered a more diverse range of things to actually make it easier for farmers to be able to do that, and maybe particularly to make it easier for farms to be able to enable different groups to be able to access the farm. I mean, even things like, helping to enable transport so that other people who can't access farms, or hand washing facilities to be developed so that it's easier for farms to invite school groups in. So the actual kind of nuts and bolts of what the schemes enable, I think there would be, although that what's there is a really good start, it would be quite exciting to see that extended, because it would enable a lot more farms to be able to do it, because we see a lot of farms who are doing it because they believe it's the right thing. But actually, if you could make sure that the time that it takes for those people to do that and do the risk assessments and make it all happen was you know, was actually valued and financially compensated, that would make a big difference. So there's, at the moment, we're actually working on a specific briefing for DEFRA outlining some of those things that the farmers have said to us, these are the things that we actually would need to be able to do more of this.
And I would agree with that, Anya. And Katie's boss, Minette, I know that's something that she wants put in there. So, because at least I had the local constabulary here yesterday, which was great fun. All the people in the village thought we pinched something, but actually we had Cornwall, Devon, and Gloucestershire police here yesterday looking at rural crime and working together. And yeah, I'm happy to do it, but those things take time. So I would completely agree with you, Anya. And I know Minette, Katie's boss, is arguing very hard for that too. So I think we're on the same page there.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's you know, a fantastic opportunity. We used to live on a farm that had a veg patch for a school that supported children with learning disabilities, and it was such a fantastic way of connecting with nature and the land and the food systems, and was really, really valuable. But again, the farmers obviously needed the support, like monetarily and also administratively, to be able to do that. So okay, moving on to our next question. It's from Jackie again. Jackie, if you want to unmute and ask your question, I think it's directed to Paul, but again, any of our speakers are welcome to come in on that.
Oh, I'm really sorry. I was tapping away, just listening to all the speakers really intently. So I noticed, Paul, that you said you were working with DEFRA about with TB. And I just wondered what your views were on the badger culling.
Yeah, so good. So great question. Thanks for that, Jackie. So just for everybody in the audience, the background to this is bovine tuberculosis is a horrendous problem in this part of the world. It's a real problem in the Stroud area, which is more for this area in here. So I got involved in it a little while ago. We had after being 11 years clear of bovine tuberculosis, we had a nasty breakdown in 2020, right in the middle of COVID. And it nearly destroyed the business. It nearly destroyed me and the family. It is a horrific disease. Basically, your farm is shut down, and animals that you've brought up and reared are killed for slaughter because they react to tuberculosis. So to answer your question on your badger culling, I'm not the world's biggest fan of badger culling in any shape or form, Jackie. And actually, the science says that actually to beat tuberculosis, you probably got a four-pronged attack. Number one is some sort of wildlife control, because you can't control one species and not the other, so you need to do that. Second one, you absolutely need to have the highest biosecurity you can on the farm. That's a given, that's thingy. Third one is clearly we're involved on the farm here in vaccination of badgers. So in theory, if you vaccinate the badgers, you stop the cows getting it and vice versa. And the fourth one, which I'm heavily involved with, is actually vaccinating of cattle. So actually, and that's probably closer, it's been 5 years away since I was a kid, but it is on its way, and we're working heavily on that. And it looks like for the first time in 50 years that actually if you have some sort of cattle vaccination, some sort of badger vaccination, some really high level of bearer security, and still have the ability for epidemially led culling, i.e. if there is an issue in the wildlife, you need to deal with it. And it's not just badgers, it's deer, it's other things. So maybe you need to deal with that as well. If you do the four things together, Jackie, you'll get somewhere. But absolutely, just doing one on his own will never work. And that's what we've been messing about with for 50 years, culling cows, culling badgers, ignoring it, putting our head in the sand, hope it'll go away. And actually, we really have a really joined up thought process on how we're going to deal with this disease. Because, of course, bovine tuberculosis is a disaster for the badger as well. You know, the badgers themselves gets it. My job on this farm is not only to raise cattle and be profitable, but I also want to look after the wildlife. And therefore, we have to deal with a disease that is horrendous for badgers and deers and muntjac as well. They get it too. So we have to deal with it as a four-pronged attack, yeah?
I was just going to jump in, though Paul sort of said what I was going to say, which is nobody wants to be culling anything. We don't want to be culling our cattle. Certainly, we don't want to be culling badgers. We want healthy badgers, we want healthy cattle, healthy deer as well, and other species affected. it is an absolutely devastating disease, and we all appreciate that it's a controversial topic. It's not an easy one to digest, but as Paul says, there are developments. We are told 5 years every year. It's still 5 years until we have a cattle vaccine, but the industry is working constantly with government in England and also in Wales, where the policies are separate and there is no badger culling in Wales, to try to tackle this disease and hopefully one day be TB free nationally.
And that the big breakthrough, and everybody on the call understand this, the big breakthrough in cattle vaccination is, number one, COVID proved that you can get vaccines rolled out a bit quicker. So everybody said we'd be 10 years for a COVID vaccine, and we were all at Malvern Showground in 6 months having a jab. So that proves it can be done. The second thing is actually you need a DIVA test. So you need a test that says the animal isn't sick, it's actually reacting to the test because it's actually been vaccinated. And we have now developed in the UK the only DIVA test in the world ready to roll out that's being tested now. So that's a big step forward. So some very clever people have put that together. And once you can vaccinate the cows and you can tell that they haven't got TB, they've reacted to a test because they've been vaccinated, the world is your oyster. Particularly if you're also vaccinating the badgers at the same time, then the whole system works. So that's what we're working towards as quick as we can.
Amazing, thank you for that. Sorry, Jackie.
No, I was just going to say thank you. It's a comprehensive answer. I'm just hoping that we can get away from badger culling at some point in this country. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. I think, again, it seems like a lot of these questions, everyone's on the same page. So that's a really positive approach that we can take. So thank you for your question. Okay, so our next question in the chat is from Greg Hilly, one of our local business owners. So Greg, are you there? And if you want to unmute and turn your camera on and ask your question.
Greg sent a message earlier saying he was leaving.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. Well, I can read out the question because I think it's still quite interesting. He was interested in hearing where organic farming fits and if organic farmers qualify for SFI.
Go on, Katie, because we can both you can do this one probably better than me.
Well, we'll do a tag team. I mean, the short answer is yes, organic farming can totally benefit from it. The SFI and all that sort of thing in ELMS has all been cautiously welcomed by the organic regulatory bodies, just like it has been by us. So that's the short answer. There's lots of standards in there which would be very which organic farmers I think would be very comfortable with, be very used to doing, the kind of the improved soil. That's what organic farming is all about. So I think it would be it's quite welcome by them as much as it is by anybody. Paul, I don't know if you have more to add.
No, completely agree. And actually, the war in Ukraine has done a couple of things really. Is obviously fuel prices, which all of you are aware of, is horrendous, and we use fuel to drive tractors and things like that. So that's the same as everybody else. But you'll be well aware that the artificial fertilizers that we buy are completely linked to the oil price, and the price of artificial fertilizer went up threefold in a month. And therefore, so some of the principles that we've learned, so we're not organic here, but actually we've learned lots of things from the organic sector and we implement them on our farm. So they all fit together, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Our next question is from Martin again. Martin, if you want to unmute.
Sorry to have me again, and this was mainly to Paul, but other people could answer as well. Is really, we know that really well managed grazing can help the soil sequester carbon, but again that has to be set against the methane produced by the ruminants. And I just wondered how the calculation go on that, particularly in your farm, but also in the university research you quoted.
Yeah, so great question, Martin. So this is a world that we're learning. So I do lots of public speaking. Nobody asked me about methane and carbon 2 years ago. Now they do. We're actually just doing a piece of work on it now. There are some really nice toolkits and tools to measure both. They measure output. I could probably answer that question better in a month's time, but certainly the work that was done by David Andrews, they measured both, and actually they came up with some very positive answers. So I mean, it's a mixture of, as you say, Martin, really good grazing, your hedges, all your trees, all that sort of stuff. You stick it together, you mash them together. And actually the other thing that we've now got and it's been announced, and some of you have seen the public, there's some quite differences in methane emissions per cow by pedigree, by breed, and by output. So actually very soon, so at the minute I would select a bull for how easy his calves are born, Martin, and milk production and growth. We'll be selecting on methane emissions within 12 months. So therefore, we'll select cows that, so some cows do are more efficient with less methane, blah, 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 blah. So the science will help us to get there. So I'm pretty confident we can deal with that one quite quickly. But I have more concerns about electric tractors and those sort of things than I think the cows is fairly easy. I think some of the other stuff might be a bit harder than we think it is, but we'll get there.
Great question, Martin. Thank you.
Good question.
Okay.
Really good question, because it's the front of mine and Katie's mind every day. We're aware of it. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Our next question is from Adrian. I think Adrian's still on the line. If you want to unmute and say hello.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Thanks to all the speakers. Really interesting evening. But my question is there a recognised apprenticeship scheme for young people to sign up to, in the way that you'd have an apprenticeship in engineering or traditional jobs? Because farming seems to be something that nobody talks about as a career at school. Thank you.
So let me pick that one up quickly, and then maybe let Katie and maybe Chloe want to come in as well. They're fairly new, so they're fairly new. Hartpury University in particular have an excellent one. So they've started exactly what you and I would call, Adrian, apprenticeship as what they are. So they exist now. And we're very lucky in Gloucestershire that Adam Henson in particular is an absolute champion of this area. So yeah, so it's not as publicly and as well known, Adrian, as you would say, you're going to be an engineer, so you would join an apprenticeship, but they do exist. They're really very, very good. A lot of them involve like an apprenticeship should, one day of learning at university and then the other 4 days on farm. So they are there, but the fact that you asked the question, Adrian, means there's more work to be done because not enough people know they're available. And I was pleased to see in Anya's slides she's working with, and Chloe's slide in particular, Chloe's last slide about things they're doing in the review with the county council farms, absolutely big part of it. We're living proof. We have we have the lad from Kickstart here. We have, and it goes back to the diversity question. My summer student from the Royal Agricultural University at Cirencester is from Zimbabwe. Her family fled persecution in Zimbabwe, and she's going to be working on my farm this summer. So, that sort of stuff is all working, but we need to publicise them better, Adrian. I don't know, Katie, if you want to add anything there, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, as Paul says, they certainly exist, and we all want to push them and make them all a lot more visible. Basically, apprenticeships and all kinds of different schemes which exist in farming. What I'd also say is beyond apprenticeships, kind of as we know them and as Paul explained them, they are, depending on the sector in farming, there are also other ways of training and getting involved. So I do a lot of work in the poultry sector. Poultry is quite a different sector to arable or dairy or beef. Similarly, horticulture, so fruit and vegetable and flowers, those are quite different sectors, and poultry in particular will train, a lot of producers will happily train someone who's 16, who's 21, who's 38. If that person wants to work in that industry and wants to learn and be involved, they will more than happily train somebody if they've got a place on their farm for somebody to do the work. And they're almost always going to, because as Paul has said previously, labour is a huge issue. So even beyond the formal training and all the different training that you can do in different colleges and universities like Hartpury, and we're very lucky in Gloucestershire that we've got both Hartpury College and University and Royal Agricultural University, so we have a good selection in this county. There are also kind of less formal ways as well, and it's just a case of looking and trying to find those opportunities for young people, and also for us as an industry to promote it and make the industry look so much more attractive and welcoming, which Anya talked about so brilliantly.
And maybe I'd just add to that so lots of LWA's kind of members provide apprenticeship and trainee opportunities. So for example, Abbey Home Farm, just the other side of Cirencester, has been one of the most long-standing apprenticeship and traineeship, has offered apprenticeship and traineeships in organic farming for a very long time. is very well regarded. I think one of the things that LWA are doing around supporting, there's probably work to be done, I think, and I would say, and it'd be interesting to see whether the other speakers agree, around kind of supporting farms to do that in a viable way. There's a whole load of questions around accreditation and different types of farming. And, you know, a lot of LWA members are very, very keen to offer that sort of traineeship opportunity. But at the moment, there's work to be done on exactly how that's valued and accredited, and what you get at the end of it if you don't go through the more formal you know, institution route, if you like, and it's often harder for smaller farmers to provide some of that. And then maybe also to say that you know, we are very lucky having the Royal Agricultural University in Hartpury, but there's also perhaps work to be done for some of our more traditional farming institutions to offer a wider diversity of types of training, and of making sure that everybody feels very at home in those institutions. And I know that there is lots of work being done on that, but there is still probably work to be done there too. Certainly anecdotally, I know of quite a lot of young people who've tried and found sometimes that a bit challenging. So I think we've just got to be honest that there is still work to be done, but there are definitely really exciting schemes already out there that are going.
Yeah, and I see, Annie, you've tagged the Great Project in the chat, and they're really good to follow on Twitter. They share fantastic opportunities quite regularly. I'm reading a particularly boring report from County, and I drift over to Twitter and I think, oh, I could go and run a farm. And but yeah, it's great the way they pull stuff together, and some of the sessions they run for new entrants and helping to network new entrants together so they can learn from each other. They do really fantastic stuff.
And just to add to that, for anybody who knows or is a farmer in Gloucestershire, they provide huge discounts on a lot of their training, really exciting training. So it's really worth being aware of them, because they provide really, really great opportunities. And if you're based in Gloucestershire, you get a discount on it. So
amazing, thanks. Well, Adrian, what a answer you got there. Fantastic question again. So our next question is from Anna, our one of the presenters from the evening. Anna, if you want to ask your question.
Thanks. These are just two small ones to Paul, actually. I was really interested to hear about your Fitbit for your cows, and I was wondering how that idea kind of came about, or how did you start that? And then just secondly, again, interested when you said you were repairing your hedges, and you mentioned that you're filling in gaps, but what else does that kind of encompass? I was wondering, like, how do you repair your hedges?
Yeah. Okay. So great questions. So the first one. So the Fitbits for cows came from a bit of biology, actually. Is that cows are hunted animals, so they are hardwired to not show pain. Okay. So basically, because a cow is a hunted animal, a cow can have a very sore foot, or can have a sore udder, or can have a stomach complaint. And actually, the science shows that actually that cow can hide that for a day to a day and a half before any human can ever see that cow is really not feeling terribly well. By the time you see she's not feeling very well, she's felt like rubbish for a day and a half and she's pretty sick. Yet things change. So a moment a cow feels sick, her chewing the cud changes. So she spends less time chewing the cud. She spends a bit less time walking, a bit less time eating. So the science came from, so the very early ones were a tag with a mercury ball in there, and they measured the ball rolling up and down, if you can imagine. Now it's an accelerometer, exactly the same as you have in your phone. And now, we're calving cows now, and now the tag will tell me cow's about to have its calf. It'll tell me cow's not very happy after had its calf. It'll tell me she's not feeling very well. And the huge thing about the tag is, unlike my great lad Liam, it doesn't have a day off. It works 24/7. It doesn't argue. So you have the very best herdsperson on the planet, and the tag asks the cow 120 times a minute, "Are you okay?" and reports back to my mobile phone every 20 minutes. So that's where it came from. The hedges is basically we're very lucky in Gloucestershire, and it's something that I'm sure Chloe will be picking up in her working group, because we generally have smaller farms. We have more hedges, so there's things like that. But clearly, like anything, they need maintenance. So what we do is that we work away with our friends at FWAG and our various people that help us with that. So each of the hedges, we will put a fence each side. So each side of the fence, because you obviously need to protect what you're putting in it, would have what you would call a sheep fence either side with some barbed wire on top to stop the cows reaching over and eating them. We're putting, so we've got 75 trees coming tomorrow, Anya. So I'll give you a clue what we're doing for the next few days. There's 25 sycamores, 25 cherries, and I can't remember what the other 25 are off the top of my head. Somebody will know. And they go in at designated points, and then we get literally the hedging plants, which are indigenous to this part of Gloucestershire. So there's some hawthorn, some other bits and bobs, and we plant those. And any of you that have been to our place, you come up the drive, the hedge on the right-hand side was planted by two students, actually, one from Hartbury, one from Cirencester, about 8 years ago, and now we have a perfectly good hedge back. And the fun bit we're also working on now is the other thing that you'll be aware of, the great old skill of traditional hedge laying, where you laid the hedge, which improved the biodiversity, but also made the hedge better for keeping stuff in so it doesn't escape. And we've just been asked to host the National Hedge Laying Championship on the farm at home. So that's another way of, if you imagine if you lay the hedge, you get different beetles and birds and all sorts of stuff. So A, I'm quite happy to host a national championship, and B, it'll improve the farm as well. So we do it, new trees, new hedges, or traditional hedge laying, which some of you will have seen. If any of you watch Jeremy Clarkson, they did some hedge laying up there, and they're great arts, but they're brilliant for the environment. They all help together, yeah.
Well, who knew there was a championship for laying hedges? I did not. Every day's a learning day. There you go.
Oh my God. And Jenny, and they are the people came around the other day. I've never seen anybody so excited about a hedge as these guys, that this was suitable for the championship, and they need 10 meters that are the same and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, it's great. A great thing, because the hedge laid will help the environment, but also it'll help the farm. So it's a win-win for everybody. Yeah.
Exactly. We need more competitions like this, that we will like tree planting competitions and solar panel laying competitions and windmill competitions, and as many competitions as we can get. Everyone loves a competition. That's fantastic news. Okay, thanks for your question, Anna. Next question comes from Trisha. Trisha, if you want to unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello. Yeah, I was asking on two grounds. Obviously, we want to get more people interested in farming and get it more of a career thing. But very selfishly, I want to get my boys outside in the summer. So I was looking for the sort of temp work that, according to the papers, all these immigrants aren't going to be coming over to do it anymore. So how can we get our children involved in that, just as a little taster? Because it's not going to be for everybody. It's a hard life. It's an outdoor life. It's not going to make the same money that they read about other careers. So it's just wanting to give them that taster and get them a little bit more interested in growing things and the outdoor life. And thanks, Anya, for already put in the chat.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and then I'm sure everyone else, all the other speakers, will have something to add as well. I mean, I think looking at, depending on how old your boys are, Trisha, what I would say is most agricultural jobs are actually advertised in the normal places. Agriculture, sort of different job sites. LinkedIn, I appreciate if you've got sort of teenagers, they may be a bit young for things like LinkedIn, but other kind of local job sites as well. And we talk a lot about migrant labour. I'm going slightly off the track, but it's a point I'd like to make. We talk about migrant labour and the need for seasonal workers in this country a lot, and the fact that we don't have enough people coming over to work. It's because we try every year, farmers who are trying to recruit seasonal labour, so pickers primarily in the fruit and vegetable and flower sector, they try locally every year, and they tell me that you can advertise locally. This is around the country, but specifically I've spoken to people in Stroud actually. You try to recruit, they say 3 Brits will apply, 2 turns up, 1's gone home by lunchtime on the first day. British people don't always want to do these jobs. They are hard, as you quite rightly point out, Trisha. That's picking. There's lots of other much nicer jobs than that. Lots of young boys like sitting on tractors quite a lot, and milking cows is an absolute delight, I can confirm. So in terms of teens and work experience locally, I mean, if you have local farmers, I think farmers are quite happy generally for you to maybe pop a letter in their mailbox, pop up and say hello to them if you know them, knock on the door and say, look, is this something we'd be interested in? And I think a lot of farmers in particular, and Paul, you may agree, hopefully, I'm sure you would agree with this, like a bit of confidence from the people they may be asking to work for them as well, or even having on farm, because there's a lot of common sense needed in it and a lot of confidence needed, I think. So, you know, if you've got teenagers, girls, boys, whoever, who want to get involved, by all means, let them take the lead and let them introduce themselves and let them ask what they want to ask. And, you know, bit by bit, hopefully we'll get more and more young people involved in farming. So it's a bit of a scatty all over the place response, but the others may have something slightly more concise to add. But yeah, ask your local farmer.
Yeah, no, I would back that. So first thing, Trisha, if your lads want something to do, I got 75 trees to plant, so that'd be handy. But no, absolutely. The other thing I would mention is obviously we've got in Gloucestershire a fabulous young farmers network. Young farmers network. Most of the kids in young farmers are not from farms, and they're a really good base. So Trisha, if your kids aren't in young farmers, I'd highly recommend finding your local club. They're brilliant institutions. They do so much great work on public speaking, on confidence and all that sort of stuff. And absolutely, just go and chat to your local farmer. We're always looking for help. There's always jobs to do, and yeah, the more the better. And of course, it's a great time of year for doing those sort of things.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Trisha, for another fantastic question. Okay, I'm just looking through our final questions. David Lungley, if you want to unmute.
Thank you, Jenny. Not very much to say. I just wanted to draw attention to what struck me as such a good idea when I read it. So long as my understanding of it is correct, it just seemed so good. To grow grass as a herbal ley, which he's going to use for his biodigester fuel, presumably needs hardly any input of insecticides, pesticides, herbicides, and so on. It will obviously still need some fertilization or farmyard manure, but the gain from that way of growing grass presumably is huge as far as biodiversity is concerned. So it was, as Paul would say, a win-win-win. I hope I'm correct in my analysis of what he's planning to do.
David, you are 100% correct. And the other nice thing about those herbal leys is they're more drought resistant. And so we have to start thinking that we're not farming in Gloucestershire, we're farming in the middle of France. And actually those sort of temperatures and that sort of stuff we're going to have to get used to. And therefore those herbal leys are absolutely correct, because you've got a mixture of species that all have different drought resistance, so therefore you've always got something to eat or crop rather than traditional grass. If that's the sort of grass that really doesn't like the drought, you've got trouble. So absolutely correct, David. Great question and absolutely correct.
Thank you.
I just jump in. I don't know about the plans that Delvince has, so I can't really answer the specifics, but I guess just as a wider point, I think it's quite important in all these things that we start thinking about what we want to use our land for, because the thing about land in general is it's very, you know, we want to put housing on it, we want to grow food on it, we want to generate energy from it, we want to leave it wild for biodiversity. So obviously every time you do something else with land, you are not doing some of the other things. So I would need to understand to properly answer and know what I thought about the answer to that question. What, like, you know, if you're putting grass to make fuel, that obviously could involve large amounts of land, which might be fine, but I don't know what the amount of fuel to the amount of land. So I guess I don't feel qualified to answer that question, but I think in all of these questions, and it comes up when we're talking about solar panels and farming, and it comes up when we talk about whether we should be farming more crops or more livestock is actually taking a bit more of a step back and looking at land use and what as a country we want our land to be used for. So I'd say the devil is in the detail there. So on the face of it, I wouldn't necessarily assume that it makes sense on every level without sort of understanding some of that, and I don't have a good enough understanding of that right now to be able to answer it.
No, I fully understand that. Of course, it's priorities. It just seemed to me possible that the amount of land we grow for meat production might reduce, which would free up some land for other uses. But I totally agree, of course, food production is going to be the #1 priority. And if there's any land available to grow grass, herbal hay on, and it fits in with the overall policy, then it would be worth considering.
And to your point, and you made a very good point, David and Anya, we've also got this big debate going on, which is very serious about self-sufficiency. So we're nowhere near self-sufficient in most foodstuffs here in the UK, and therefore, you know, that you can get really excited about all sorts of things that we shouldn't do this, and yet we'll happily eat food that's been on a boat from South America. I mean, so all those debates need to be had. But absolutely, I mean, our job is the other thing is, David, our population is going to get bigger, so we've got to get more efficient, whatever happens. So, you know, the population isn't going to get smaller, and in our lifetime, that is predicted to get to 9 billion. So it's a real balance for us. So I agree with all the comments made. Yeah.
Me too. I think they're really valid concerns, particularly. So I think I'm really interested in that particular project too. But that once you start doing things at scale, all of those. The devil is definitely in the detail. But I would just say, in terms of biogas generation generally, there's a really interesting project down on the Cornish county rural estate where they're using biogas generated from slurry, and they're then using that gas to power the tractors and actually selling the excess to local farmers. And so in terms of locals, you know, self-sufficiency within the farmer, within the local community, and using all of the waste that you know, putting, you know, one person's waste is another person's treasure, that kind of, you know, reuse and repurposing. I'm really keen on any kind of scheme that it follows those principles.
Yes, another thought is that we cut our verges and leave the grass lying around, and that's unproductive grass. Yeah, there may be ways in which we can apply the principle you've just said. Use the waste for productive purposes.
Thanks, David. I'll let Katie come in on this, and then I will go to Iris. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce, but yes, just a final word from Katie, and then we'll go to Iris's question.
Yeah, conscious of the time as well, and agree with all three of the other speakers. Really good points. What I would say, it's a really difficult one, and as the NFU, we're facing a bit of a what's our position on this? Because on the one hand, food security is an issue, land use is an issue. As Anya says, we need a lot more detail about some of these things. On the other hand, we like farm diversification because it helps farmers be profitable and more resilient economically, and it's very difficult to say what the right thing to do is. We generally say, if it's a high grade land, so grades 1 and 2 land in particular, probably shouldn't have solar panels put all over it or be going into a biodigester. It should be for food. But it's a really, really difficult situation. So it's a really good question, actually.
Thanks, Katie. Yes, and why are we putting solar panels on farms? We've got thousands of factories being built across Gloucestershire that have no solar panels on their roofs. Okay, great question, David. Thank you. Iris, would you like to unmute and ask your question or comment on this discussion that's already going on?
Hello, hi. I'm Iris McCormick. I work at the RAU, and I just wanted to add, because I know we've been talking very directly about farming, but there are lots and lots of jobs around farming which are really important. So there's lots of work in conservation. That includes conservation grazing, and we have, you know, beautiful calcareous grassland, very rare grassland in the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire. Agronomy, farm advice, and a huge need for ecologists. So, you know, if you've got young people here today, there are other ways to be involved on the land that aren't necessarily holding a tenancy or trying to get hold of land, but are working in the sector and really exciting and interesting jobs.
Thank you for that comment. And yes, you're absolutely right. There's a whole job ecosystem that lives and surrounds the farms that we know and love and appreciate, and like all of our speakers have mentioned, want to develop and you know, make more resilient and make profitable into the future. So thank you for that. So we're flying towards 10 o'clock now. I can want to thank all of our speakers for all of the comments that they've made and all the really fantastic questions. It was great engagement from the audience tonight. So the last thing that I usually do is just ask our speakers to give us sort of 1 minute summary. What do you want people to take away from today's conversation? You know, what's the final moment, the final thing that you'd like them to go home with tonight? And while you all have 1 minute to think about that, I'm just going to plug our previous cloud cafes. Obviously, this is a subject that really interests a lot of people. We've talked on things in and around this before, so you can access all of our previous cloud cafes on our website. We've talked about things like footpaths and the right to roam, which has touched on land ownership and rights of way. We've also had a fantastic session on valley protectors, which is looking at river health and sewage pollution and clean river campaigns. Really fantastic session. And also creating resilient and sustainable local food supply chains, which we had another member of the NFU there, and you know, some local farmers and local business owners. So if you're interested, please take a look at our website. Okay, you've had 1 minute. I'm going to be mean and choose someone at random. Chloe, I'm going to go with you.
Well, I just wanted to say a big thank you, really, because the motion we put forward last year involved a lot of people on this call, and alongside it, an awful lot of public questions that went to the same meeting. I think out of 35 questions, 25 related to farming. So I'd just say that support is so valuable. It helps us to keep farming and the county farms in particular high on the agenda at councils. So keep it up, keep those questions coming, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. Okay, I will go to Katie next.
Chloe's totally taken my point. I was going to say, if people have questions about farming, if they're not sure, if they have a view that they think that they've picked up from somewhere and they think it may not be the full story, please ask a farmer. Please ask us, please ask any of the speakers tonight. Please ask. We're an industry very dedicated to trying to promote all the positive messages and you know, let everyone know what it is that we're doing so that everyone can eat 3 times a day, for those who are very fortunate among us. So that's what I would say, is ask.
Thanks, Katie. Paul, would you like to give us your takeaway message?
Yeah, one word: balance. Everything's about balance. Yeah. So if we go too far and save the environment, we'll starve. If all we do is worry about food production, we won't have an environment left. So there's a classic of it. So we just need balance in all these things. But with really good science and working together and engagement, we can absolutely control climate change. We can feed the population, and we can all leave a great countryside for our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, but we need balance.
Thanks, Paul. And last but absolutely not least, Anya.
Thank you. I'd say 2 things. The first one is that we need to start thinking, talking and asking about land, noticing the land around us, thinking what we want it to be for, noticing who's working on it. And the second one I would want to say for people to remember is that there are people, a lot of people who really want to work in land-based work, and we need to remove the barriers to enable them to do so. A lot of the coverage is about how desperately needed that work is, but there are many people who really want to do that. So the time is now to remove some of those barriers.
Thanks so much, Anya, and thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time to share your expertise and share your knowledge and share spark some interest in the local community and these things that are so important to all of us. If you feel like contributing to our fundraiser, then please do. All of our speakers give their time for free, but there's a wonderful team who do all the organizing in the background and find these speakers to share their skills and knowledge with you. So we would really appreciate it if you have the time and capacity for that. Again, thank you so much to Stroud Young Greens for being involved tonight, and you know, keep being involved, keep fighting for a seat at the table, and all of us who are, you know, not classed as young anymore, let's make room at the table for young people. Their voices absolutely matter, and you know, they bring a different kind of perspective and a different opinion to these really important topics that is just as valuable as anybody else's opinion. Thank you to our organisers, Liz, I know you're somewhere, Elizabeth. As always, the link for this recording will be shared in the coming days, and please pass it on and invite others to engage with the Cloud Cafe community, which we've been building since the beginning of COVID and is now a really strong community that we really value in Stroud. Whether you're based in Stroud or not, local elections are happening. Go and vote. Vote green. I know I shouldn't say that, but vote green. Yeah, just keep coming to the Cloud Cafes. We appreciate you, and thanks so much, everybody, for your support, and we will see you next month. Okay, have a great evening. Bye,
cheers,
guys.
all.
Thank you, Jenny. Night all.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.